Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call the meeting to order and acknowledge that we are in Treaty 1 territory, the home and traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Ojibwe, Inuit, Cree, and Dakota peoples, and the national homeland of the Red River Métis. Our drinking water comes from Shoal Lake 40 First Nation in Treaty 3 territory. On the panel today, to my right is Mr. Harvey Diamond, and to his right is Gail Anderson. My name is Brett McIntyre, and I'll be chairing the hearing today. Our assessor today is Jonathan Spacek, and our administrative personnel is Jaswinder Kumar. We will be hearing applications for revision of the assessment roll in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested have been described in each application, and we will limit discussion to those matters. The statements that are made at this hearing are sworn testimony, and anyone speaking to the matters must be sworn in. Be advised that comparisons of assessments of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the Board of Revision. The Board of Revision is appointed annually by Council and is independent of it from the City Administration. It makes its decisions on the basis of the evidence provided at this hearing and issues a written order that will be mailed out to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the Board's decisions with respect to an application may be appealed to the Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or to the Court of Queen's Bench if the matter pertains to the application of exemptions from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included with the Board's order. With respect to the hearing process, I will confirm the points of appeal with your property to be addressed, with each applicant following the swearing in. We will then have the assessor's testimony followed by questions that the applicant may have, and then the applicant's testimony followed by questions. Each side will have an opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all the evidence about an application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket today. The session will close after all the applications have been heard, and the Board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. You will receive the Board's order, its decision by registered mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live streamed, recorded, and will be part of the public record. We will be hearing items 1 through 5 today on our docket. Mr. Kumar, please affirm the assessor and the applicant's testimony. Thank you.
So, Assessor, please state your full name.
Jonathan Spacek.
Do you affirm that the evidence you are about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do, yes.
Thank you. Mr. Applicant, please state your full name.
Mark Newman.
Thank you. Do you affirm that the evidence you are about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Now, I've noticed today there's one submission from the applicant on non-recoverable expenses. Yes, I suggest that, subject to both parties' agreement, that we have that presented first and apply to all the records.
I'm fine with that.
Jonathan, are you okay with that?
That works for me.
Okay, sounds good.
And to clarify, presented in the context of the first property.
Yes.
Yes.
We have to identify.
Yes. Yes.
The first property on the docket today is 720 Broadway. And Jonathan, are there any preliminary issues on this one, either party?
None on my side.
Okay, thank you. And Jonathan, you can proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have roll number 12090410200. This is 720 Broadway, located on the corner of Broadway and Maryland. We have a 2023 assessment of $1,790,000. This is a two-story, what we have as an OFC classified office building. And you will see pictures of the subject property on my page 2 and page 3. We have a gross floor area of 18,108 square feet and a total leasable area of approximately 15,222. We have an effective years built of 1974, and the original building was built in 1960. If we can turn to my page 5, we have an income workup for the office portion of the property. You can see we have C2 standard finished tenant class of 15,221 square feet. This is $10.03 a square foot, model generated for this square footage. And you can see our OFC parameters for 2023 going down. We have a 12% vacancy loss market allowance. if you scroll down a bit, we have our expenses at 3%, which you may have noticed went up from 2% from the 2020 cycle. So the city has increased the expense for non-recoverables from 2% to 3%. And again, you'll see our shortfall is $10, which has went up as well. Again, these are two factors that increased over the reassessment cycle to take into account some of those heightened expenses that owner has from things such as COVID. So we've also included, which you'll see later, a COVID questionnaire with each property, which I've included with the income and expense mailers as well. And you can see those to get an idea if there's any major differences from COVID for each business owner today. We have an overall capitalization rate on this property of 7.1%. Again, this is model generated, and this is how we get the total $1,578,000 for the office portion. And you'll notice there's another $212,000 for parking, which I'll go over after my comparables for this property. So if we turn to page 6, you'll notice we have a market rent of $10.03 on this property. And what I did was put together some comparable leases across downtown that are classified as OFCs as well. Again, these are usually 3 stories and higher office buildings, older effective ages, and there's quite a few of them across downtown. But you'll see, for example, I'll just pick out a few here, but you can look. My first comparable is on 305 Broadway. You're able to get 1,140 square feet signed in 2020 for a 6-month lease at $12 a square foot. Comparable 2 is 248 Edmonton. This is on the 2nd floor, unit 204. You can get 5,000 square feet at 1092, signed in 2020. And another very recent lease, 207 Donald, unit 100. You have 4,600 square feet at $10 a square foot. And you'll see if you just go down to the bottom of my comparables, comparables 11 through 14, you see a larger square footage. So I've tried to throw those in there to see what larger square footage downtown will lease for. You can see at 1200 Portage Ave, you have a big 3-story OFC. It was built in 1972, so very close to our subject. You have a start date of 2019 for a 5-year lease, 12,899 square feet at $10 a square foot. And for the 2nd floor of that property, you have 13,653 square feet at $12 a square foot. And then going into the exchange for comparables 13 and 14, you have 136 Market and 65 Rory. These have some larger square footage spaces in there, and you can see 15,000 square feet leased for comparable 13 at $11.50 a square foot, and 16,356 square feet at 65 Rory leased for $12.50 a square foot in 2018. If we scroll to my page 7, you will see there is parking associated with the property. So if you look at my pictures at the back of the building, there are 28 stalls. We give a market rent, a net market rent of $31.50 per square foot. So this is what we estimate the owners to make after. You could look at it as a net rent for that parking stall. So they're making approximately $31.50 a month revaluing this parking lot of having it. And you can see that's capped at 5%. And this parking lot in the back is have an added value of $212,000. And you can see on the bottom of page 7, there's just some parking comparables as well. These are outside of the downtown. Some of our outside of the downtown core parking lots. You can see the most comparable would be actually comparable number 1 at 248 Sherbrooke Street. This is a 44 stall lot on Sherbrooke Street, very close to the subject property, and they're gathering approximately $40.88 a stall net. And there are some more surface parking lots you can look for there. Page 9, we have our classic capitalization rate sheet, which you'll see all day. We don't have a column for OFCs. OFCs are not commonly advertised as cap rates out there. You will see we have the closest ones we have that we're looking at today. We have the top rows of this sheet. You'll see the office section, property type downtown A, B, suburban A and B. You can see our suburban OFS Our city of Winnipeg, if you look at the city of Winnipeg column, which is about 4.3 is the third column from the left. April 1st, 2021, we have our range of cap rates that are used in the 2023 cycle. So these are the ones we are using, model generated rates, the 20th to 80th percentile range from on the low end of 5.6 for suburban A and B OFS, which is suburban office. And then you'll see the 80th percentile goes up to 6.9%. You will see we have a Collier's range of 6 to 6.75 for OFS. And then we have CBRE going over to the right. We have 6.5 to 7% for the suburban A, and then for the suburban B, they have a 7.75% range for the 2023 cycle. And then Cushman and Wakefield range from 6.25 to 7 for suburban A, and 6.75 to 7.75 for suburban B OFS. You will note that our subject property has a model generated rent of 7.1%. And if we just continue to scroll, I've just included the income and expense method for this property. So on page 11, they have a lease in place for this property. It's a net lease for 16,500 square feet. So this is more square footage than we are currently have as leasable in the building, but they have an annual rent of $107,250, which works out to approximately $6.50 a square foot. I do not have when that lease started. I do not know if it's just a short-term lease to fill the space for a year, or it looks like it ends July 31st, 2021, but I am not aware of when exactly if it was signed. And you'll see on page 12, we've also included from the income and expense method, just so you can see some of the revenue generated from this property and expenses, and just a basic overview of it showing a net operating income of approximately $135,000. And if you look on our page 5, which our model workup has approximate NOI of $112,000. And we've also included on page 13 and 14 the COVID questionnaire that we sent out this cycle to try to get a better idea of what kind of challenges, if any, were these owners facing with COVID. And you can see on this property was filled out by the property manager, but I put it backwards. On page 14 is the first. You'll see there was out of the 3 options for impact, it was a minor impact. Again, were tenants' location closed temporarily due to public health measures? No. Question 3, have any of the existing tenants closed permanently as a direct result of COVID-19? No. In 2020, has the property experienced an increase in operating expenses? No. Question 5, did the property incur non-recoverable capital expenses related to health and safety precautions taken in response to COVID-19? You'll see that's checked no. Question 6, have existing tenants requested rent deferral or rent abatements resulting from COVID-19? No. And if you scroll up to page 13, you'll have the last few questions. You'll see, were there any new leases negotiated after the effects of COVID became apparent? No. Question 8, have any of the existing leases been amended as a result of COVID? No. 9, have any tenants abandoned or breached the terms of their leases as a direct result of COVID? No. And 10, has the property received any government-funded assistance grants or financial support associated with COVID? And this property has no. So again, just a very brief overview of that, so you'll know what those questions are going forward. And I believe that is all I have today. So if you have any questions, please let me know. Thank you.
Thank you. Mark, do you have any questions?
I do, thank you. So, Mr. Spatzek, this property, as you've noted, is at the corner of Broadway and Maryland, correct?
Yes, sir.
And if we look at your brief, if we look at page 2, we've got an overhead view, the top photo, an overhead view of the area. So the property is the property with the red teardrop on it. To the left of it, across Maryland, is another office building on the corner of Broadway and Maryland, correct?
Correct.
And that building has a parking lot behind it, correct?
Correct.
And to the right of the subject property is another building that is at the corner of Broadway and Sherbrooke. That's the building that until recently was a Nygaard outlet and now is Total Flooring, correct?
Correct.
And that building has a parking lot as well, correct?
Correct.
And across the street, we can see an office building, and there's parking at the west corner of Broadway and Sherbrooke for that property and also behind, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So, unlike downtown Winnipeg, there are no large office buildings in this area, correct?
Sure.
And similarly, there's no movie theaters, there's no restaurants in this area, generally speaking, correct?
I mean, you'll find restaurants down Maryland and Sherbrooke, but yeah, not across the street, no.
And the point I'm actually making through all this is, in terms of the parking lot, surface parking lots generate their business from surrounding properties, generally speaking, correct?
Yeah, they can, yes, absolutely.
And I want to be clear, obviously this parking lot services this building. I accept that, but the parking lot doesn't have a market for casual parking, to your knowledge, correct?
Yeah, sure. There's, yeah.
This parking lot is not under management of a parking lot company, for example.
No, I didn't see any M-Park signs or anything.
Yes,
or any M-Park leases.
There's no ticket dispensing machines on this site, to your knowledge, correct?
Not that I saw.
All right. Now, the rent comps that you've used, let's go to page 6 of your brief. So these buildings, you use the phrase to describe them as being across downtown, and then you said also in the exchange. Is that fair?
Yeah.
And these buildings, without exception, every one of them has an elevator, correct?
Yes.
The subject property does not have an elevator, does it?
It does not.
And as soon as you have a building without an elevator with upper floors, you no longer have barrier-free access for those upper floors, correct?
That is very correct, Mark.
And that will create a limitation on the pool of potential occupants for the upper floors, correct?
That would make a difference, yes.
And again, your comps, generally speaking, and you made reference to comps 11 and 12, those are out on farther out Portage near to Wall Street, correct?
Yes, down.
Well,
Broadway.
1200 Portage, sorry. 1200 Portage is near to Wall Street, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And with that exception, again, generally the comps are either in the downtown core or they're in the exchange district, correct?
Correct, Mark.
Okay. And in terms of the surrounding area that surrounds the subject property, would you agree that it is a bit of a rougher area in terms of the activity in the neighborhood?
Yes, for sure.
Okay. Now, turning to page 7, your parking lot valuation. So you've used a 5% capitalization rate. That is the capitalization rate that is used for surface parking lots, correct?
For surface parking lots, yes, it is one of the rates used.
And that rate, as we've discussed earlier, this property has no demand outside of the building, has no casual demand, correct?
Well, we've determined it's not being used for that right now, correct?
Right. Then if we go to your page 9, your capitalization rates. So, you noted that there is no OFC category in the information that the city provides through this chart. And you suggested the closest would be the OFS, and you made reference to the A and the B, correct?
I did, yes.
Okay, I think we can agree this is not an A-class suburban office building.
Absolutely.
Agreed? All right. And I'm going to suggest to you that it's not a B-class office building either. Do you agree?
I will agree.
All right. So this chart is not actually all that helpful in terms of determining where the capitalization rate should fall. Do we agree with that?
Yeah, I would agree.
And do we also agree that for the 2020 assessment, the capitalization rate on this property was 8.15%?
Is that what you asked for, or is that what it was at?
That's what it was.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, let me turn to the non-recoverables for a moment. And again, I'll do it once and I won't do it on the other properties.
So are you making the presentation then?
No, I'm just going to ask the assessor some questions.
This hasn't been put into evidence yet, has it?
No. But I'm free to ask the assessor some questions, I believe.
But that's not his evidence.
I can ask him some questions generally. I would suggest, I would ask. May I?
Well, why not include it after your presentation to do it once and once only referring to that document? Isn't that simpler?
Fair enough. Fair enough.
I mean, you can still ask them the questions when you're talking about that document.
Sure. Okay. Those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Gail, any questions?
I have no questions at this time. Thank you.
Harvey?
I believe it, thank you.
And let me just check. And I have no questions. Thank you. Mark, you can start your presentation.
So, this property, as we've heard, located at the corner of Broadway and Maryland, bit of a rougher area, no elevator, no barrier-free access, not quality building, an older building, dated in every respect. I've been in the building. The assessor made note of the existing lease, but expressed uncertainty as to what its commencement date was. I can indicate it was a 5-year lease, which would have commenced in 2016. And actually, I didn't ask the assessor this question, but in his brief, and I don't need you to go back to it, in the photos on page 2, the lower photo is a copy of the front of the building with a for lease sign at the front of the building. And I actually checked. That image is dated June of 2021. So that's the dating of that Google Street View image. And that's a reflection of the fact that that lease was expiring. So if I'm a buyer coming on the scene at April 1 of 2021, what I am faced with is a building with a lease that expires in 4 months. And I would suggest respectfully that that will increase the risk. And we see in the assessor's photo the for lease sign on the building. So again, a lesser quality building in all respects. My concerns primarily are the rent and the capitalization rate and the non-recoverable allowance. Let me just deal with capitalization rate in one respect, which is the parking. And I spent the time asking the questions I did about the parking because I don't think it's appropriate to select a 5% capitalization rate for a parking lot that is not a standalone parking lot, that has no separate demand generators to feed it business. This parking lot exists solely to service the building. And as you may know, and as we will hear when we come to talk about 570 Portage, there is a City of Winnipeg bylaw that says if you have an office building outside of the downtown core, you have to have parking. And that's why many of the buildings have parking, and especially along Portage, many of the buildings have taken what used to be houses behind them, going north or south of Portage as the case may be, They've been converted into surface parking lots because the bylaw requires them, but also more practically, you can't have an office building unless you have somewhere for your tenants to park. So that's the other reason why that happens. And as I say, we'll get into it in the context of 570 Portage, and we'll actually look at the bylaw. So my position simply is I'm not quarreling with the NOI that the assessor is using. I'm quarreling with the capitalization rate. The capitalization rate for the parking lot should be the same capitalization rate ultimately selected for the building. That's my submission to you on that. So let's turn then to the office building. If we go to what is page numeral 3 in the lower right-hand corner, PDF page 3, I learned from the first time I did this to make sure my pages lined up with PDF numbers. So it's PDF page 3. So my view of the rents that have been selected by the assessor is that they are all a better quality building in a better location. They're elevated. Many of them are 3 stories at least and more, sometimes 7 and 8. 305 Broadway, which is the northeast corner of Broadway and Donald, is an 8 or 9 story building with a Starbucks on the main floor, or certainly at one time anyways. So they are higher quality buildings with elevators in a better location, all of which improves the quality of the leases. And so respectfully, I say that they're not the best comparables. I have at page 3 identified 3 comparables that are more in the surrounding area, 2 of them especially, 635 Broadway and 125 Maryland, which I think is a typo. Actually, I think it's 120 Maryland. And then 1200 Pembina, and you can see rents in the $8 per square foot range. Again, the subject is dated in every respect. You've got a lease with a single tenant done in 2016 at $6.50 a square foot. The history on this property, and Mr. Spasic and I have done this property before. At one time, there were many tenants in the property. It was a multi-tenant building. They had vacancy issues. They were able to find a single tenant for the entirety of the property at a rate of $6.50 per square foot. I'm suggesting to you that that is much closer to the appropriate rent than the $10.03 that the assessor is using. On the issue of non-recoverable expenses, so as part of my report, and you don't need to flip to it at the moment, I'll just tell you about it and then we'll go to it later. Commencing at PDF page 23 is a roof report dated June of 2021 that speaks to the condition of the report. It notes that certain parts of the roof, in particular 5,576 square feet, the plan area of the building is 8,857 square feet. So a portion of the roof that is approximately 2/3 of the roof needs to be replaced. There are alternatives, $86,000 for one, but if you want to bring the insulation up to an R25 level, that's a total of $121,000 to redo that portion of the roof. The reason I tell you this is because it fits into the non-recoverable issue. So the assessor has moved to 3%. That's an increase, as the assessor noted, from the 2% last time. Even using the assessor's rents based on $10.03 a square foot, 3% of effective gross income is $4,030. So if I've got to spend $121,000 on a roof as a landlord, it's going to take me about 30 years at $4,030 a year to recover the cost. But of course, there's much more to non-recoverables. And now I'm going to speak briefly to the non-recoverable issue, and I'm going to go to my submission.
Are you finished with? So you're going to, let me get this straight. You're gonna go back to your main submission after the non-recoverable?
You don't want me to do that. You want me to finish the main first.
I would prefer to get
I'll do that.
those questions out of the way.
I'll do that.
Okay,
I'll
thank you.
do that. Okay, so then I'll put the non-recoverable aside for the moment. I've spoken to the capitalization rate on parking issue, which is at PDF page 4 in the middle of the page. Again, simply there are no demand generators around this property. This parking lot serves the property only. And now I'll come to the capitalization rate. 7.1% is too low. For 2020, the designated rate, not what I requested, but the rate assigned by the city was 8.15%. And it is difficult for me to understand how, in the context of what we've gone through over the last couple of years, how capitalization rates can have come down the way the city is suggesting on buildings of this type. So I'm going to turn the pages of the rest of my submission, starting at PDF page 5. So, there's a section out of Colliers on how they categorize different types of buildings. And as the assessor has confirmed, this is certainly not a suburban A, and it's not a suburban B. The COVID impacts, we've been through this for a long time, but I think sometimes we forget some of what we've gone through. And so I've got a little bit of a chronology. But in March of 2020, a state of emergency was declared. Essentially, everything was closed down. Then we went through peaks and valleys, a bit of a yo-yo effect, where things were opened, things were closed. But what we have seen above all is the concept of remote work. And I know sometimes in these hearings, panel members are attending remotely. I know assessors, every hearing I've had thus far, assessors have attended remotely. It is the trend. More and more, you see the difficulties that downtown areas of cities are facing because they cannot get foot traffic back downtown. People don't want to come. I get it. It's much more convenient in many ways to work from home if you can. People don't like to travel if they don't have to. They don't like the hassle of parking if they don't have to. So more and more people want to stay home. The other thing that has happened in offices is what I'm going to call vaccine mandate conflicts. There are people who do not want to be vaccinated. It creates conflicts within offices. It creates problems. There were impacts on the payment of rent. At the bottom of page 7 and on to the top of PDF page 8, there's a report from Colliers about the percentage that 39% of tenants cross-country were asking for rent relief. We know that there were COVID subsidy programs. And I'll tell you this once, I won't tell you it again on the subsequent properties. There were COVID rent subsidy programs that were put in place. Reality is many of tenants who have stayed in place are there only because the government gave them money and because the landlords gave them money. And but for that, they wouldn't be there. We're going to see the effect of that as we move forward. Investor expectations and the office economic climate. I'm at PDF page 9. I suggest to you that investors were concerned about the quality of investments and the stability of the office market. Remote work I've talked about. Then I go to the Winnipeg capitalization rates, the brokerage firms. I remind everyone that the Colliers rates are a little bit out of the ordinary in the sense that the Colliers methodology is to include all closing costs in the sale price. So land transfer tax, legal fees, placement of mortgage, all of that is included in the purchase price. And when you have a higher purchase price with an NOI that stays the same, the capitalization rate comes down. Rocky Neufeld from Colliers has said to panels here, it is a marketing tool that the brokerage side of Colliers uses. So whenever you look at the Colliers capitalization rates off their charts, you need to be a little bit careful about their methodology. Quality and strength of covenant. It's an important factor when we look at small office buildings. The majority of tenants in these buildings are small local businesses. The quality of covenant is not strong. The strength of the tenant is frequently uncertain, frequently exacerbated by COVID. We're seeing buildings, office buildings, converted to other uses as an indication that the demand is diminishing. So at PDF page 12, I list a variety of factors which get taken into account in determining the quality of the property, the quality of the tenancy, national versus local, nature of the tenant mix, location, quality of the site, both and on these two, I would say in relative terms, a poorer location, a poorer quality site, quality of development, a dated building, nothing modern about it in any respect, neighborhood demographics, poor, quality of covenant, diminished, lesser, amenities in building, no elevator, no barrier-free access, older mechanical systems. And so when I look at all this, and I look at the chart, and now I'm on PDF page 13, where I have reproduced the charts, and I've reproduced them from 2000 the 2020 assessment, and I've reproduced them from the 2021 assessment. And for all those reasons, my view is a capitalization rate of 7.1% for this property is too low. At page 14, I summarize the reasons why. I know that the 2020 capitalization rate was 8.15%, and I've ultimately selected a capitalization rate of 7.75%. And so let me continue to turn the pages. Let me jump you ahead to PDF page 23, which I spoke about a little bit earlier. There's the roof report that I described to you earlier. If you go to PDF page 24, there's a heading recommendations. Actually, at the top of the page, what they call roof B is the heading. Last bullet, we recommend this roof be replaced in 2022. And then under the recommendations towards the bottom, there's the heading recommendation 1, roof replacement, roof B, 5,576 square feet. And it goes on to give you two prices, 86,000 plus GST on page 25, or 121,000 inclusive of GST. And that's if you bring the insulation up to R25. So, you know, that's what we've got in terms of the cost of the roof and the need for repair. And then finally, we get to page 31, where I've used 16,500 square feet. Let's be clear on why the assessor's got a different square footage. When you have a single tenant, you can say to the tenant, you pay rent on the entirety of the building. When you've got multiple tenants, you've got common areas that the tenants won't pay rent on. So that's why historically this was 15,221 square feet, because it was multi-tenant. Here they've been able to get the tenant paying on the entirety of the footprint of the 2 floors of the building. So you can see I've used a 7.75% capitalization rate, which frankly may be relatively conservative. And so that is my main brief.
Thank you very much. Jonathan, do you have any questions?
I have no questions. Thank you.
Just a question in regards to the photographs in your submission on page 15.
Yes.
What was the date of that photograph?
I can't tell you the date of the image. I know it was earlier than June of 21.
Okay.
Because again, I very specifically, when I saw the assessor's photo, I checked the date of the image. Last night, in fact, I checked the date of the image. So obviously the space was not for lease at that point, so it's an earlier point in time.
And just one more question. With regards to the tenant that's in place, was there a request to reduce their rent?
I don't believe so. This is a, I believe this tenant was an indigenous based organization. Likely a lot of their funding comes through government or quasi-government funding, and I don't think they requested it.
Okay. Thank you very much. That's all my questions.
Thank you. Harvey?
So, Mr. Newman, you last indicated that the last assessment had a capitalization rate of 8.15%.
Yes,
You're now asking for 7.75%. So
Yes.
you're agreeing that the capitalization rate should be reduced.
I'm being quite conservative in what
Okay.
I've done.
Yeah, that's just the part.
Yes.
Okay. Secondly, then, so you're looking at the same capitalization rate for the parking lot as for the building itself, because you're
Yes.
saying there's no other stream of income from that parking lot.
Right.
And in the 8.15%, did that envision then the same capitalization rate for the parking lot as the building itself?
So on the 2020 cycle,
Yeah.
the assessor's approach was the same, a different capitalization rate for the parking lot as opposed to the building. My position was the same. I believe the end result was a single capitalization rate was used.
So you're saying a single capitalization
Yes.
rate was used and the rest of that again?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Just a question. So they entered into a 5-year lease in 2016. Why wouldn't the parking lot have been included with that lease if it's solely for tenants in that building?
Well, perhaps the tenant didn't negotiate for it. I mean, there is some revenue associated with it. But I don't know the answer to that. But I take your point.
Yeah, because typically that's what happens for these particular buildings, isn't it?
It can, or it can certainly be part of the negotiation. Sometimes there might be a preferred rate on the parking, for example, or a certain number of free stalls. Those are various permutations and combinations that can occur.
But as it exists now, only the people in that building can park in that lot.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. That was my only question. Now we'll proceed with your non-recoverables.
Yes.
Okay, I'll just give us a second. Get there.
Yeah.
That's right at the bottom. Are you there, Harvey?
Yeah.
Okay. Jonathan, you're there?
Okay, so I will abbreviate. What this submission has, and again, the page numbers track the PDF numbers, including the attachments. So what this submission has is a little bit of text at the beginning. It goes on for 10 pages, a little bit I said. It goes on for 10 pages. It's then followed by 60 plus pages of attachments. What the attachments are is excerpts from textbooks, excerpts from MPAC, the Ontario assessing body, excerpts from SAMA, the Saskatchewan assessing body. I'm not going to take you through all that. When I take you through the text, the excerpts are there so you can see them. But I think it's important to understand that in concept, I and the assessor do not agree that a non-recoverable allowance is appropriate. The issue is how much. And the issue is the history of how this came to be. And so many of you have heard all of this from the 2020 cycle. So I will abbreviate it somewhat. So we agree, both sides agree that an allowance is appropriate. The question becomes how much. So if we go to PDF page 2, so that's where I introduce this. I remind the panel, those who have been around long enough to remember, that until the 2020 assessment, the assessor allowed both a 5% deduction and a 2% deduction from effective gross income to get to net operating income, so a total of 7%. With the 2020 assessment cycle, the assessor eliminated the 5% deduction and allowed only 2% for 23. the assessor has increased the deduction to 3%. And again, we don't disagree on the concept, it's the quantum. Why do we have a non-recoverable allowance? We have it, and appraisal methodology, lower half of my page 2, speaks about this, because the appraiser, the evaluator, must take into account expenses that will not be recoverable, because the object of the exercise is to get to what will the net operating income be. So appraisal methodology requires an identification of the expenses. Over onto PDF page 3, it's noted that expenses can be of a fixed type, a variable type, and they can be replacement allowances. And then there's the quote from the Appraisal of Real Estate, 3rd Canadian edition. The appraiser should also account for non-recoverable expenses, also called non-rechargeable. Most important non-recoverable are space marketing costs, which include both tenant inducement and leasing costs, and allowance for structural or mechanical repairs. So structural, of course, is things that go wrong with a building. When you have to replace a parking lot, for example, that's structural. When you have to replace a roof, that's structural. When you have to lease the space and pay a commission, that's a leasing cost. When you have to give a tenant inducements to get them in, those are tenant inducements. And I know the assessor takes the view that they will recognize costs like roofs and costs like parking lots and other structural repairs, but they don't want to recognize leasing commissions. I know they say that, but that's a reality of what landlords have to pay. And certainly the texts recognize, the authorities recognize that those are appropriate expenses. So down at the bottom of page 3, I list a variety of types of expenses that frequently are not recoverable from tenants. So vacancy, but that's dealt with through the vacancy allowance. Professional fees, management fees, frequently there will be a recovery under a lease for that. Owner repair and maintenance, like structural, tenant improvements, leasing commissions over onto page 4. I mentioned depreciation and mortgage interest. I don't include those in any way in a non-recoverable allowance, but they are part of the reality for the landlord. Marketing and advertising, free rent. These are all expenses that may be incurred that are not recoverable typically from tenants. Then on page 4, I go into a section called Assessor Historic Non-Recoverable Allowance. I've already explained that to you. I go back further in time with some history. I'm not going to dwell on that. Page 5, 2020 Assessor Change of Approach. I've told you about that generally already, so I'm not going to dwell on that. Then at page 6, so there I speak to the fact that other assessment authorities recognize this concept, again, as this assessor does. So from Saskatchewan Assessment Management Agency, this is from some of their materials published. Again, the concept that there are some expenses that are not recoverable and they need to be taken into account. And then at page 7, so non-recoverable operating expenses typically not included in a lease, legal and audit fees, structural repairs, and repairs which are capital in nature, such as a roof, wall repairs, parking lot resurfacing. These expenses don't typically occur every year, I agree. Advertising and promotion to fill vacant spaces, leasing commissions. Ontario, MPAC, Municipal Property Assessment Corporation, the Ontario Assessing Authority, in materials it publishes online. If you jump ahead to page 8, almost in the middle of the page, typically 2 areas which where the property owner has to cover non-recoverable operating expenses such as legal and audit, advertising and promotional, and expenses associated with operating any vacant space. That's covered off in the shortfall, so that's not part of what I'm suggesting needs to be addressed. So, but then if you look in the large quote, there's 3 paragraphs in the quote. If you look in that middle paragraph, Even with triple net leases, there are expenses associated with operating buildings, not necessarily passed through the tenant, but rather absorbed by the owner. May include items such as marketing costs, large capital cost project, legal and audit, ongoing expenses associated with vacancy. Again, that's covered off through the shortfall. So that's really what I wanted to explain to you. And again, all the backup material is the history, it's excerpts from texts and from SAMA and from MPAC, simply to make the point. And as I said earlier, I gave you the example in this case of the fact that the roof needs to be done. And the assessor's allowance was $4,030 at 3% using the assessor's rents. And if you do the roof to the tune of $121,000, that's going to take about 30 years to recover the cost of that roof. That ignores other structural, that ignores legal and audit, that ignores the parking lot, that ignores all those other things. And that's why I say to you simply, 3% is not enough. Those are my submissions.
Thank you. Jonathan, any questions?
I have no questions for Mark, thanks.
No?
I have no questions.
Art?
No questions.
Thank you.
And I have no questions. Thank you. That concludes 720 Broadway. And we'll proceed to the next property on the docket, 570 Portage Avenue. And Jonathan, you can start your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We are at roll number 120910290000. This is 570 Portage Avenue. It is located between Langside and Yonge on the south side of Portage. We have a 2023 value of $3,524,000. This is a four-story office building with a first, you can see on my page too, for be able to see what I'm talking about, but it has some main floor units that jut out to Portage itself. And then it has in the back portion, the 4 stories of the office building go up. We have a actual year built in 1962 and then a effective year built up to 1980. Since our last cycle, you will see that there's a gross floor area of 46,290, and we only actually have 27,339 square feet of this building as leasable area. If we scroll to my page 4, you'll notice they've always sent in the request for information. We have received the income and expense mailer, and then subject sale April 6, 2021. So there's a $3.5 million sale, but I did review and it was between there were related parties within that sale.
Jonathan,
so,
that's
yeah.
post reference.
Yeah, my understanding was this was negotiated and the price was settled. Like that's when it went through land titles. It would have been again. I guess it doesn't matter. In a sense, you can ignore it. It's just I did review it, and there was related parties in there, but it does print up, so you can just leave that. We have page 5 is is our model workup for this property. You can see exactly where the values come from for the income approach of that 3.5 million. We have multiple units in this building. You can see the different square footages that add up to 27,339 of leasable, and you can see that there is a range of rents on the main floor and up that range from a low of 1326 up to 1568. And you'll notice the second last unit, 6,882 square feet. We have $8.53 for that storage / mezz. This is a basement conference gym space within the building. It is not leased out to anyone, but it is again considered an amenity type of space, and our model gives that $8.53 a square foot. So you'll see very similar to our last property, it's an OFC. We have a vacancy loss of 12% for 2023 for OFCs. We have expenses at 3% again. We have a shortfall at $10 as well for all that vacant space of that 12%. And then we have an overall capitalization rate of 7.3% on this property, and that's where we get that total $3,524,000. On page 6, I'm using the exact same comparables as last time. We're pretty close in location. We are again another OFC building, but you can see the exact same range of rents as the last property we had. I will not go over that again. If we turn to page 8, again, same capitalization rate sheet. If we turn to page 10, we've actually included the 2019 income and expense mailer. So you can see where they're generating revenue from. You can see they have base rent, parking, revenue, and the parking revenue, it is a separate lot. So if you look at my page, if you can go back up to page 2, just so you have a better understanding of this, the office building itself, you see exactly where it is on the corner of Portage and Yonge. If you look across the back lane, going down Yonge to the south, there's 292. That's a parking lot for the building that is directly beside the subject property. And if you go south a little more, you'll see the parking lot with the yellow lines along Yonge. That is a zoned vacant residential. It is a larger parking lot that is used for this property, and also spots in it are leased out to University of Winnipeg students and teachers. You'll see it's answered a little better on the COVID questionnaire when I get there, but it's not, this parking lot is not valued as part of our lot today. It is separately valued as a vacant residential, vacant land, but this parking lot is used for, some of the spots are used for parking for the building. And so that is just, I wanted to explain that. You'll see on page 10 of the mailer there is parking revenue, so they are gaining, the year to date for this one was 37,965, so that's where that parking lot revenue is coming from my understanding. And then they also get their common area recovery, tax recovery, management fee recovery, utility recovery, and then sign revenue from their billboard on the top of the building. But again, total revenue, and then you'll notice under there we have all of the total expenses for the property, or what is sent into us. Going down to the bottom of page 10, you'll have some non-recoverable expenses added as well. And if you do go to page 11, you'll see the master rent roll. So this is where some of that parking income is coming from. You'll see they do have some parking only tenants that are paying $75 a stall. On page 11 and page 12. At the bottom of page 12, you start to see the leases that are actually in place for the building. You'll see the Unit 100 Chicken Chef downtown. We have 1,380 square feet leased at $17 a square foot base rent. You'll notice on page 13, we have Unit 101, Smiles on Portage, is paying a base rent of $9 a square foot for 4,667 square feet. Unit 200 is Capital Commercial Real Estate Services. They have a base rent of $12 a square foot. Rubin Insurance Brokers on 300 has a 1,830 square feet for $11 a square foot. Unit 301 is $11 a square foot base rent. And again, you'll see on page 14, we have Capital Commercial Real Estate Conference. There's that 6,880 square foot. It's lower level, so they just have that space under their name. And then you have the roof, again, where the sign is getting its income from. If we turn to page 15, there was a COVID questionnaire sent in. Slightly different than ours, but answering some of the questions. You can look over this. Question 1, what percentage of tenants have requested rent deferral and for how long? You'll see the response, 16.67%. One tenant has requested a base rent deferral for 1 month to be amortized for the remainder of 2020. The third question, what percentage of tenants have closed temporarily due to social distancing from March 18th to date? You'll see the answer is Smiles on Portage was temporarily closed from March 18th until May 4th, only providing urgent/emergency dental services. They also experienced a break-in on March 23rd during this time. Chicken Chef downtown was open for takeout or delivery. They are looking to sell the business and have fallen behind on monthly rent payments. And then if you look at the sixth question, what approximate percentage increase do you anticipate in the next 6 months of reopening for the following expenses due to COVID-related health and safety measures? And then they said, we have spent an additional $3,000 on installing astragals on the front back door as a result of the dentist break-in and increasing loitering in the back parking lot and increased loitering and surrounding vicinity of the building. And then the third last question, you'll see any additional effects on NOI or value due to global pandemic the assessor should be aware of. The building rents out parking spots to university students and staff at U of W. With in-class stoppage, 3 individuals have canceled parking. So again, those are the added notes that were sent in by the owners for this property. And I do know that my only other note here is on page 1, the actual year is built 1962. We have an effective year of 1980. The physical condition of this building, as of when I last looked, there was permits taken out in early 2022, and they were doing renovations from the 1st to 4th floor and replacing the elevator. So when that is being completed, I know that the effective year was upped a bit slightly to help better represent the higher quality and updated building going forward. But that is all the changes I have note of. That is my presentation. If you have any questions, please let me know.
Thank you. Mark, any questions?
Yes. So again, just so we're clear, the sale which you referenced, you're not relying upon it in any way because of your view it's between related parties.
Absolutely, yes.
Okay. We have done this property before, Mr. Spacek, so and you talked about the parking lot at the rear. And this is an example, as I alluded to in the earlier property, where properties outside, office buildings outside of the downtown core have to have parking, correct?
According to the downtown zoning bylaw versus the outside of downtown zoning bylaw, is that what we're talking about?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes. And so this building, for 2 reasons, cannot operate without parking. The first reason is you need parking for your tenants. Do you agree with that?
Parking for tenants helps, yes.
Second reason is the bylaw requires you to have parking. So for both those reasons, you need to have parking.
Yes, you make sense, Mark.
And that has led to us discussing in the past the concept that the parking lot in the building should be treated as a single economic unit, correct?
We've had the argument that on my side of it is it has a much larger lot than required, even if it were to not be grandfathered into those parking bylaws, then it has, I think, is where our biggest argument comes from, correct?
But the concept of a single economic unit has been recognized by prior panels, correct?
By you're saying prior panels have taken off value of the parking from the office?
Well, they have done that. That's okay. You agree?
I'm not sure. I'm asking. No, I don't, because I don't know. I'm asking for clarification on what you mean. How have they recognized the parking?
By making a deduction of the parking lot from the overall building value.
Okay, I don't have those orders in front of me,
Okay.
but I believe you.
Okay. So so let's go to your brief, please. So page 5, which calculates the value of the property. The rents on that page are all model rents, correct?
That is correct.
And with the exception of the 1,380 square feet, which is the standard restaurant, every single model rent is higher than the actual in place, correct?
Then the current lease in place, yes, correct.
And in fact, the model I would suggest to you generally is showing rents higher than those reflected in your comparables on page 6.
Yeah, I would say some rents are higher for sure. Absolutely.
This building is just outside, but it's west of Memorial Boulevard, correct?
It is west of Memorial. I'm just mentally placing where that is, but I believe you, yes. Yes, it is, absolutely.
West of the bay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Is the closest nearby office building the building across the street at 471 Portage?
That's one of them for sure, yeah.
And as you noted in your evidence, the basement area is not leased and serves as an amenity space for the building as a whole, correct?
From my understanding, yes.
You've not been in the building, I'm gathering.
I have not walked through, just seen pictures.
All right. Those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Gail, any questions?
No, not at this time, thank you.
Harvey?
I don't have any questions either, thank you.
And I have no questions.
Okay, so this building has a lot of moving parts to it, which is my way of saying a number of issues you're going to have to decide. Part of the reason for that is the issue of the parking lot and the concept of the single economic unit. Part of the reason is the rents that the assessor has utilized. Part of the reason is the capitalization rate. So again, for 2020, the capitalization rate was assigned at 8.15%, and that was accepted. It's now reduced to 7.3%. And so what I tell you in my submission at page 2 is that 570 Portage and 280 Yonge are a single economic unit. The adjacent parking lot at 280 Yonge is valued at $695,000. I'll come to the assessment sheet as we turn the pages so I don't have to jump you back and forth. In 2020, the value was fixed at $1,725,000. To that would be added the value of the parking lot, which at that point was $442,000 for a combined value of $2,167,000. The 2023 combined value, if you include the parking lot, so for the building alone it's $3,524,000. If you then included the parking lot, we'd be at $4,219,000. I appreciate 280 Yonge is not before you this morning. I understand that completely. But that's what we're dealing with. And I would go so far as to say and to undertake that if ultimately the decision were to be that from the value of the building as you determine should be deducted the value of the parking lot, I would withdraw the parking lot appeal. I know I can't do that until you render your decision, until I see what you've done, but I'm telling you, I would do that. Last time, for whatever reason, 280 Yonge and this property were brought forward on the same docket, and they should be. And I'll show you in due course a prior order of this board where the panel said these properties should be merged. They can't be.
Across a lane.
Across a lane. But the panel recognized the concept that they're a single economic unit. Okay, so what have we got to deal with here? PDF page 3, I reference the issues. I reference square footage, rent, non-recoverable expenses. You've heard me on that. I won't repeat the non-recoverable submission. The deduction of the parking lot value based on a single economic unit, and the capitalization rate. So on the square footage issue, what I'm explaining is that 6,882 square feet are located in the basement. It was finished as a meeting room available for tenants of the building. It's an amenity for which no rent is charged. It's rarely used. It's an encumbrance to the building. There's no rental market for space in that configuration. There are many other buildings in the city which have amenity spaces, and I'm on to the top of page 4. My office is at 360 Main on the southwest corner of Portage and Main. There's a conference room on the main floor. It's used as an amenity space for the building. If my office needs additional space to hold a function, we can go down there. And these amenity spaces frequently arise, and when people design buildings, they think they'll be able to lease space. Eventually, they come to learn, I can't lease this space. It doesn't work. This is what happened in my building at 360 Main. They can't lease it, so they turned it into amenity for the building. 400 St. Mary's has a 12th floor meeting space as available to all tenants, as the building does at 155 Carlton. I've put a rate of $1 per square foot on that. I'll come to talk with you more about that when we turn the pages. I can tell you that the City of Winnipeg Assessment Department, in the context of business tax, agreed that a business tax assessment for this space should be vacated because there was no business being carried on down there. So that's the story on the basement space. Rent of $12.40 a square foot. As we've discussed, and the assessor has taken you through the rent roll, I think those rents are reflective of market. I'm also going to show you the rents for 471 Portage. 471 Portage is the building a little bit to the east along Portage on the other side of the street. It is the office building immediately to the east of the University of Winnipeg. It is the office building above the old bus station, and immediately to the west of the Holiday Inn Hotel on the corner of, I'm going to call it Memorial, but it's not Memorial once you're on the north side of Portage, of course. I forget the name of what it is. It's not Isabel either.
Colony.
Colony. Thank you. Thank you. But I've given you the rents for 471 Portage, and I'll show you a chart in a moment. And it's also got some basement space, which is actually used by both the University of Winnipeg and the University of Brandon. Mr. Spasic and I are quite familiar with this building because we've done it before, and it rents at $4 a square foot gross. Non-recoverable expenses, you've heard me. The parking lot, I'm going to show you some more materials on that. The capitalization rate, 7.3%, is too low. I give you essentially the same submission on the capitalization rate, and at the end of that submission, I come to a rate of 7.75% for this property. I think that's not unreasonable for this property. In hindsight, I think the rate on 720 Broadway on a comparative basis at 7.75 is probably too low. So then I'm at page 16 now. So there's a photo of the front of the building. And then at page 17 is a photo taken from the rear, and I think it gives you a better visual of the parking lot. That parking lot you see is 280 Yonge. And that is assessed at $695,000. Page 18 is the actual assessment as available online. Page 19, this is 280 Yonge Street, and it's the assessment of $695,000. So I told you I would show you that. Page 20 is the questionnaire, and Mr. Spasic has really taken us through that already in terms of the rents, so I won't go over that again. Page 29, we get back to the basement a little bit. Here's a layout plan of the basement, and as you can see, you've got what's called a fitness center, you've got what's called a conference room. You're going to see some photos of these things in a moment. So page 30 is a photo of what I believe is what is called the conference room. You can see the large table down there. Somebody had grandiose plans when they did this and furnished it. It just has never worked. There is a bit of a fitness area there that's available at page 32 to tenants of the building. There's a lot of plants down there. I can't imagine they're real, but there are a lot of plants down there. And then page 34 is, I think, what would be called the training room. And then page 35, a reference to the conference room. So page 36 is an email exchange between I and an assessor at the City of Winnipeg going back to 2010. And what it speaks about is a reversal of the 2009 business assessment for the lower level 570 Portage space, as well as the 2010 vacate. And if you go to page 37, you see my email to the assessor, Marlene Hatterer, indicating that the business assessment for the lower level will be vacated. And so that was done because it was recognized that there was no business being carried on. Page 38 is the essentially the rent roll for 471 Portage. And again, I think that's the closest and most similar office building locationally to the subject. You can see that the basement leases to Brandon University and the University of Winnipeg, some of them at $4, some of them at less than $4. And this space is used. There are classes that are conducted in those basement spaces by these two universities. And then you see the balance of the tenants in the building. You can see the City of Winnipeg at 4,408 square feet at $12 a square foot. You can see University of Winnipeg on the main floor at $13 a square foot. University of Winnipeg up on the 8th and 9th floors at $12 a square foot. So, you know, I gave you this in many ways because I wanted to give you an indication of rents, because I think the rents actually available in the building are appropriate market rents. Then we get to page 39, and here are materials from the City of Winnipeg bylaws. And so I start out with a heading, economic unit parking lot. So anything that's covered by Winnipeg zoning bylaw 200 of 2006, in other words, anything outside of the downtown core, which is covered by bylaw 100 of 2004, have to meet the parking requirements. Parking category 18 applies to offices, one spot for each 750 square feet of floor area, but not less than 2 spaces per tenant. That is a requirement. Then at page 40, I begin a discussion of the decision relating to the Forks, and the dispute in that case related to a parking structure at the Forks, which is quite near to the Inn at the Forks Hotel. So there's a 3 or 4 level parking structure that was built. The question was, should a value be put upon it? And the argument being made by the Forks was essentially that if we don't have this parking, if the Forks doesn't have this parking, then the Forks can't function. And ultimately the conclusion was that this parking structure actually did not have a value. They did not put a value upon it because it was necessary to support the entirety of the Forks. The Forks worked as a commercial center, I'll call it, only with that available parking. And so they actually did not put a value upon that. The concept of subtracting adjacent parking lots is also recognized in the context of hotels. And if you go one page, don't go yet, so I don't want to flip you around too much. I'll show you in a moment the next 2 pages, which in the context of hotels, where there are adjacent parking lots, they are deducted from the value of the main hotel building. Then I come back to 570 Portage. I speak to the fact that we have a decision in 2016, which I will show you in a moment, where the board recommended in its reasons that the roles be merged, which as we have discussed cannot happen because of the intervening lane. The 2020 decision removed the value of the parking lot from the value of the subject building. Page 42 is the Canadians Club Region Casino Hotel. If you look down at the bottom of the page, you'll see an arrow. That arrow is the subtraction of a parking lot with a value of $2,414,000. If you look at page 43, that is the Canadians Windsor Park. You'll see an arrow down at the bottom. That arrow is the deduction of the parking lot with a value of $246,000. Page 44 is a decision from 2015 of a panel of this board relating to 280 Yonge. And if you look to the top of page 45, the recommendation that the owner apply to merge the role with the adjacent building to meet the lease requirements with regard to parking for their tenants. So, again, this has happened, and then I actually give you excerpts from the decision of the Forks, reflecting what I had addressed with you earlier, and you can see at page 48 and 49 some arrows in the margin where I speak to where the board speaks to the fact at the bottom of 48 Parking is not required under the zoning bylaw. That's because it's in the downtown core and covered by the downtown zoning bylaw. But nonetheless, it's in close proximity to the Johnson Terminal, the Inn at the Forks. Without the parking, the property wouldn't see the number of visitors. For these reasons, the board does not assign a separate value for assessment purposes. And then ultimately, you see my value of the building at $2,038,000, and then my handwritten notation subtracting the value of the parking lot. Just so we're clear, I've used the actual rents in place when you look at the rents, with the $1 per square foot for the conference center. I've used the assessor's 12% vacancy and $10 shortfall. My non-recoverable is at 7%, and the cap is at 7.75, as opposed to the assessor's 7.3. So those are the issues, and that is my submission.
Thank you. Jonathan, any questions?
Just a couple very quick, please, Mr. Chair. Mr. Newman, my question is just regarding the parking. For these zoning bylaws, what happens, do you know what happens if a building does not meet the bylaw requirements?
It depends on when it was built. Sometimes they are grandfathered, and there's no concern. I can tell you in the context of this building, they actually had to apply for a variance, and were granted a variance in the 1980s. I've seen the variance order, but it allowed these adjacent lots, which have a residential zoning, it allowed these adjacent lots to be used for parking, and there's a variance granting it.
Thank you.
Just let me one more thing. I think if you were to build a new building today and didn't have the parking available, you wouldn't be allowed to build it.
Great. And have you determined how many parking spots are currently required based on the leasable square footage of this property?
I have a recollection that we've addressed this before, and the number is 60.
All right, and would you agree that there is approximately, I just, counted from above, but 75 stalls in the parking lot?
I do agree.
All right, and so according to the mailer, would you agree that the owners are leasing out 10 spots for $75 a stall?
I agree. 75 gross.
Yes, 75 gross for a stall. And would you agree that the mailer shows an income? Well, would you agree that if you did 10 stalls at $75 for 12 months, that would be $9,000 gross reported?
I would agree.
And would you agree the mailer shows $37,695 as gross rental income?
I agree.
So would you agree that the majority or 28,000 of that would be not associated with the building?
No, it's the opposite. The majority is associated with the building.
So are you saying that those 10 stalls being leased out, those are the University of Winnipeg students and staff they're talking about?
Right.
Except for the one that says specifically Smiles Dental, that's associated with the building, right?
That's correct.
So it's not just purely being used for the building, though? Correct.
Right, and the questionnaire recognized that.
Okay. And then, so you're saying with the Forks that from that order that the parking is required, that's just part of your one economic unit?
That's correct.
And would you agree there's some pretty big differences between our subject property and the business model of the Forks?
I agree.
That's all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. And Gail?
I have no questions. Thank you.
Harvey?
Yeah, just a couple of questions. Mr. Newman, first of all, you indicated that all those improvements in the basement were grandiose plans by the developer.
Yeah.
They thought they could derive income from them, but it turned out they couldn't.
Sorry.
You said they thought when they did it, they could derive income from it. It turned out they couldn't. Would you agree, though, that the fitness center and all those other amenities, the conference rooms that are very nicely finished, according to your photographs, would enable them to make the other office building more attractive?
Sure.
And they can get additional rents because of the amenities in the basement.
In theory it can, but we see the rents it's getting. But in theory, yes, I agree.
Yeah. Okay. And, okay, that's my question. Thank you.
And I just have one question regarding the leasable area versus the total area of the building. Is it substantially vacant?
No. So the assessor shows the leasable area 27,339. My workup shows 26,000.
482.
482. You know, their buildings get reconfigured over the years. Things move around a little bit sometimes. Partitioning walls get moved around. I can't account for that slight difference. But obviously there are some slight differences in some of the identified units that are, because I've gone off the rent roll,
Right.
that are creating the differences.
Okay, that's fair. That was my only question. So that concludes 570 Portage Avenue. Does anybody need a break? Jonathan?
If you don't mind, I could use a quick washroom break, please.
Okay, we'll recess for 5 minutes.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Okay, we are like this.
Thank you very much. We'll reconvene the hearing. And the next property on the docket is 698 Corden Avenue. And Jonathan, do you want to read the record in? And I understand there's a recommendation?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just open the right one up here. All right, we are looking at roll number 12022250000. This is 698 Corden Ave. We have a 2023 assessment of $2,961,000, and I'm making a recommendation to reduce it to $2,518,000.
And could you read the property description for me, please?
Absolutely. Like you'd like me to describe the property?
Yeah, your section that reads property description.
Yeah, sure. We have a two-story OFS built in 1970 with an effective age of 1989. We have a gross floor area of 16,107 square feet and a leasable area of 14,170.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chair, I think I have to go out and fix it. I'm not getting the audio on the YouTube.
Oh, okay. We'll take a short recess for technical issues. Thank you very much. We'll reconvene the meeting. The next property on the docket, which Jonathan, you've already spoken to, was 698 Corden. And I understand there's a recommendation?
Yes, sir. How is my mic?
Fine.
All right, let me just find that again. We have a recommendation. It's different from the one printed on my brief. It's been updated since, but Mark's, from my understanding, in agreement of this one at $2,518,000 for 698 Corden.
I agree.
2,516,000?
18.
Oh, 18.
Yeah, $2,518,000.
And Mark, you're okay with that?
I am.
Thank you very much. Let's proceed to the next property, 611 Corden.
All right, very similar situation. We are looking at roll number 1202179655611 Corden. This again is another two-story OFS on Corden, built in 1987. We have a gross floor area of 10,868 square feet and a leasable area of 8,701. I'm asking at the 2023 assessment of $1,794,000, making a recommendation to reduce it to $1,531,000.
And Mark, how do you feel about that?
I feel good.
Do you accept it?
I do.
Panel members, do you have any questions?
No, I have no questions, thank you.
Thank you. And the last one on the docket is 218 Osborne Avenue. And Jonathan, you may proceed.
Thank you. If we all turn to page 1 of 218 Osborne, we're looking at roll number 1202123900. We have a 2023 assessment of $2,034,000 with a quick property description. I do have a recommendation that Mark is not in agreement with, but I'll give you the number so you have it. This is a building built in 1914 with an effective year of 1950. We have a gross floor area of 27,870, and according to this brief, a leasable area of 23,889. But if you just let me find my right page here, that is updated to, apologies, I must have closed it. One moment here. So if so going forward for the remainder of this brief, if you could just write down an update. I'm having I've updated the leasable square footage. There's always been a contention with the square footage in prior appeals, and what I did was I updated it to the most recent mailer, 19,010 square feet at $9.40 a square foot. So using the rest of the parameters that are the same according to the income workup you'll see, using the 15% vacancy, 3% expenses, $8 shortfall, and a 7.7% cap, I'm recommending a reduction in value to $1,617,000. So if you could write down that $1,617,000, that's using all of our model parameters for this OFD, using a $9.40, which is the overall rate the model gives us property, and then I'm just adjusting the square footage to 19,010.
And I think we all have that. And Mark, how do you feel about the recommendation?
I feel it's a good start, but we're not quite there.
Okay, Jonathan, continue with your presentation.
I will. So thank you, Mr. Chair. If you look at my page 2, you can see a picture of this property. It's at the corner of Osborne and McMillan, right at the Confusion corner there. You can see at the bottom of page 2, we have the 3-story, red brick building. And again, we have this as a what's considered an OFD or an old office downtown, 3-story plus. So these are, due to the very old age of the building, being built in originally in 1914, and then after some updates, it's at an effective age of 1950, which is still very old. So this is very similar to lots of buildings in the Exchange District, built around that era, and some of the rents and quality of the building reflect that. So you will see that on my page. Where do I want to start here? Well, if you look at page 2 quickly, at the top picture, the aerial view, you will see that the subject property we have is circled in a darker purple with the red airdrop, and you'll see there's 2 buildings directly beside it to the north, 216 Osborne and 214 Osborne. So these are all owned by the same owner. They're on different titles. You can see different lots, but the difference in leasable area over the years has come from 214 and 216. Those retail shops, the square footage being on the mailer is 1. So there's always this difference in square footage, and I think after looking back on the last couple hearings, I looked at the notes and I've determined that for our subject property, and it looks like the mailers being sent in from last cycle going forward are updated to not include those spaces, so I think things are cleaning up, but that's where that change in square footage comes. And so really we're just looking at the building I have outlined, and we're excluding 214 and 216. Those are heard separately. They are their own buildings on their own lots. So if you all turn to page 5 now, you'll see this is a multi-tenant building, lots of smaller units. That's why we have so many different specific units here. They all get their own rent, when all I did was break it down to that $9.40. That's the overall rent for the building. So we're taking all of the space and just giving it that $9.40 square foot. And you'll see the rest of the parameters haven't changed anything. So near the bottom of the page, you'll see our vacancy loss on this building is 15%. Again, this building does have higher vacancy, as do lots of those OFDs, and that 15% market rent is, an attempt to cover it from year to year. So when it does better, if it's under 15%, we still keep it there. And when it's above 15%, has higher vacancy, we're still using that 15% for these properties. And you'll see the expenses as similar to the other properties. We're still at 3% for expenses, and we have $8 shortfall for these OFDs. And this is where at the 7.7% overall capitalization rate is on the top of page 6. There's so many units that it's actually pushed over to the next page. And then again, I'm using that total value of $1,617,000, not the $2 million that's being shown. And that's how the total value is produced for this property. And again, I've included a range of OFD rents at the bottom of page 6. So these are usually higher in floors and older in age. And I've tried to include units in size that are similar to our subject property. But you can see I have OFDs on 326 Broadway, 167 Lombard, 237 Portage, 167 Lombard, and 226 Osborne North. What I've did is I've included 2 OFSs, which are down Osborne, closer to downtown. They're comparable 11 and 12. 2 small units in there. The rents range from $12 to $12.25, and my rents of all the OFDs range on the low end of $9 up to the high end of $16. And if we turn to page 10, you can see the actual mailer of this property. You can see what the revenue is granted. It is a building that's full of gross leases, so there's not really a net base rents you can see to compare it to our net rents, but you can see what rents are reported, what expenses are reported on page 10 and 11, and then page 12 going forward is just the gross lease rent roll for the units in the property. And you can see at the bottom of page 15, as of the end of 2019, you have 13,000 square feet lease and 5,000 square feet vacant. So again, the building does have higher vacancy, and we are trying to reflect that with our higher OFD vacancy of 15%. And you'll see on our COVID questionnaire part, starting on page 16, this property out of the 4 subjects has not, out of the 4 options at the top, has not impacted, minor impacted, moderate impact, or significant. They have checked moderate impact. So this building has, shown a little bit more suffrage from the COVID. You can see question 2 is answered yes for temporary closed. Question 3 answered yes. They say the S-swab group benefits closed March 31st, 2020, and then a pinch of creativity closed March 31st, 2020. Question 4 is both answers no. Question 5 answer no. And then question 6, have existing tenants requested rent deferral or rent abatements resulting from COVID? Yes, you can see the Susol made it in June 2020 deferred to be repaid by March 31st, 2023, and then T-Story landlord abated $500 per month from August 1st, 2020 to December 31st, 2020. If we turn to page 17, the second page of the questionnaire, you can see yes for question 7, 2 new leases had extra 2 months on average of free rent. Question 8, no. Question 9, yes. Swap group benefits closed March 31st, so the same as the one above. A pinch of creativity closed March 31st, 2020. Both abandoned the spaces. Loss of income equals to $2,800 per month. And then has the property received any government funded assistance, grants, or financial support? They answered no. So that's all the information we have on this property from my end. If you have any questions on it, please let me know. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mark?
So, have you been to this property?
Have I been in all of it? No.
Okay. Have you been in any of it?
Yes, I've been on the main floor over the years, but never through the multi-tenant portion of the property.
All right. So, there's no elevator in this building, correct?
There is none that I know of.
And if you look at your brief, you look at page 3, the top photo, that's McMillan. That's the south face of the building, but that's McMillan Street, correct?
That's the top of picture 3.
And then the lower photo is the north face of the building, with McMillan visible, some cars visible right at the left edge. So that's the north face of the building.
Very true, Mark.
And so the tenants who are on these floors, they are accessed not through an interior hallway, but through an exterior walkway, correct?
Correct.
The comparables that you have listed on page 6, do they all have, or at least the OFDs, do they all have a 7.7% capitalization rate as well?
I did not look at their assessment this cycle. I could not tell you, sorry.
And then you made reference to the vacancy of 15%. You and I have had discussions about the vacancy, so you've looked back at the vacancy history. Is that fair?
That is correct, Mark.
And is it fair to say that for 2017, 2018, 2019, and 2020, vacancy has been in excess of 25%?
Yes, that would be from 2017 going forward, and then in 2016 it was 11%. So you can see where the vacancy started to go up and where it's remained higher from 2017 going forward.
But of course, we're dealing with the willing buyer at April 1 of 2021, correct?
Economic conditions, absolutely.
And so that willing buyer, what that buyer will know is that for the 4 prior calendar years, vacancy was in excess of 25%, correct?
That owner would know that. That is correct, Mark.
The 15% vacancy is model derived, correct?
Yes, so 2020 cycle of OFDs, the vacancy was at 14%, and in this property for 2023, it is at 15%. And
But
if
again,
that's the same across all OFDs, I'm not 100% sure. I do know the OFDs are always higher in vacancy, so being right around that 15, I'm not surprised.
And my experience, Mr. Spacek, with the department in terms of vacancy is that once vacancy is continuing for over 2 years, it's considered to be chronic. You agree?
It depends. Just high vacancy wouldn't be considered chronic. Our definition of chronic vacancy is 25%. When we put a 25% on something, it's because the windows are boarded up and it's not being used at all. And our high vacancy would be for offices around 15 to 25%. In between there is kind of the range for a highly vacant building with lots of vacant space.
And so
our highest of vacancy we put for on these properties would be like 25% is our definition of chronic vacancy.
those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Gail, any questions?
No, I have no questions, thank you.
Hart?
I have no questions.
Jonathan, did you rework the NOI on this property?
I do. I have a workup for this property. The updated NOI using everything I said before with our basic parameters is $124,521.
Thank you. That was my only question. And thank you very much. Mark?
So, 3 issues on this property. I'm fine with the rents. So if we go to my brief, PDF page 2. Just hang on for a second.
Everybody there?
Yep.
Okay.
So let me start by just making something clear. The recommendation that's been made, I'm appreciative of it, but essentially what it does, from my perspective, is it puts the value of the property at the correct starting point by correcting the square footage. But there remain some issues which I'm now going to address. So rent is not one of them. I accept the $9.40 a square foot. If you look at my brief, you see on page 2, PDF page 2, you see the vacancy listings for 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020. This is a building that is dated in every respect. Kind of a strange building in a lot of ways, frankly. Think about an office building where you don't have interior hallways. Instead, you have an exterior walkway to get to the offices. And you'll see as I go through my materials a floor plan, and you'll see what I'm saying a little bit more, but you can see it in the photo. That was part of the assessor's brief, and you'll see it as part of mine. So square footage was an issue. That's now been addressed and corrected to the 19,010 square feet. I accept the rent. Vacancy is an issue. Non-recoverable expense is an issue. I reference deduction of parking lot based on a single economic unit. In the end, I don't do that, but it is something to have in mind when I come to address the capitalization rate. So if we go now to PDF page 3, at the bottom of the page, we see the vacancy listings that I've already showed you. But what I then do is I do a calculation, and so I tell you that the lowest vacancy was 2020 at 5,190 square feet, which based on 19,010 square feet calculates to 27.3%. It's 32.2% in 2019. It's 34.38% in 2017. As the assessor has recognized, the city does go higher than the model 15%. My view is this property has a chronic vacancy problem, and any buyer at April 1 of 2021 would recognize 4 years of vacancy in excess of 25%. I also give you a decision of the municipal board in a case called Ono Restaurant, where vacancy was set at 35%. I'll come to that as we turn the pages, but the ask ultimately is for 25% on the vacancy based on what's actually happening on the property. Non-recoverable expenses, you've heard from me. The capitalization rate, 7.7% in my view for a building with this location, in this condition, with this vacancy is too low. I raise an issue about the parking lot and about 214 and 216. And you can actually see in the photo that the property behind the buildings fronting on Osborne at 214 and 216 is used as parking. I attached the 570 Portage 280 Young decision, but in the end, notwithstanding my saying all this, I'm not asking to deduct the parking, the adjacent properties from the value, but what I am saying is it should be taken into account in the context of the capitalization rate. So then at PDF page 5, I deal with capitalization rate. I indicate that 7.7% is too low. I gave you the same history and information that I gave you that we reviewed in detail when we dealt with 720 Broadway. I'm not going to repeat that. I come to page 12, and now I look at the attributes of buildings from the perspective of putting them in their rank order or comparative order. And again, what you've got in this building is a lot of small tenants. It's a difficult location to access at Confusion Corner. The development is old, it's dated, it's got no elevator, the covenants are not strong, it's got limited parking, you can't park on McMillan, at least right by the building. So it's a dated building in many respects. This is not a suburban B-class building. So, in my view, the capitalization rate has to come up, and I set the rate at 8%. And now let me turn the pages, and then I'll come to the value finally. So I'm on page 16 now. So now you see a photo of the south face of the building. That's McMillan Street. Page 17 is a photo looking westward. You see the parking in behind 214 and 216 Osborne. You see an overhead photo. Page 19 is the calculation of the original assessment. Page 20 was some information relating to the dating of the property. Page 21, so here are the floor plans for the second and third floors. And the reason I show you this simply is that you can see there are stairways. So the left-hand side of the photo, both of them, that is what faces onto Osborne. And you can see there's a door in the middle of the building, and there's stairs you come up, and then similarly those stairs keep going up from the second floor to the third floor. Then if you go to what I'll call the middle of the photos, you can see there's a set of stairs in the middle of the photo. That's a courtyard. That really separates what I'm going to call the front building, the portion that fronts onto Osborne, from the portion that's located to the east of that. That courtyard is actually how you get to all the offices, because you go up the stairs and that brings you onto the outdoor walkway, which then is the doors for all the premises. And if you look at Unit 11, for example, on the second floor, you can see the doorway coming in. And then if you continue in a downward through Unit 11, you can see another doorway which opens out to where the stairs are. Those are the back doors for the premises. They're not the customer doors, because those doors on McMillan are permanently locked. You can't get in through those doors. The only way you get into this building as a customer is one of two ways. You come in through this central courtyard area and you come up these stairs, or it's like an apartment building. It's got an intercom. You could get buzzed in by a tenant. Why? Because you can't leave doors open in this area. It's a difficult, rough area. So it's an unusual building. Page 22 is a chart showing you the vacancy on a unit-by-unit basis over the years. And that's where my numbers come from. I went through the rent rolls for each of those 4 years, and I tracked the vacancy to be able to tell you what the vacancy was in square feet, and to tell you, as I've told you previously, what the vacancy is on a percentage basis. Then pages 23 through 39 are the rent rolls for at April 1 of 21, which is pages 23 through 28, pages 29 through 32 is the rent roll at June 1 of 20, pages 33 through 38 is the rent roll at April 1 of 19. So I've given you 3 rent rolls, again, to evidence the detail of the spaces that are vacant. Then at page 40, I give you the municipal board decision in Ono Restaurant. And let me say that I'm familiar with the assessor's concept of the maximum vacancy you can get is 25%, and then it's got to be vacant for 2 years, and that's why I asked the question I did. Well, the municipal board doesn't always feel that way, and if you look at page 47, in the first full paragraph at the top of that page, in the current appeal, the board is prepared to allow a 35% vacancy for the second floor space. There is evidence of long-term vacancy of over 50%, and there is no on-site parking. So again, I just give you that so that you'll understand that vacancies over the model 15% are frequently allowed. Pages 49 through 59 are the same economic parking unit information I gave you on 570 Portage. We can skip by it because I'm not asking ultimately for a deduction for the parking lot value, but what I am saying to you is one of the factors to take into account from a capitalization rate perspective and the quality of the building is the availability of parking. And this building does not have a lot of parking available. And then the last page, 60, is my calculation of value, except I made a mistake. Because one of my cells was not properly populated, and it created a mistake, because if you look at that, if you look at the shortfall, you'll see that it's 0. Page 60. That's because I didn't populate one of the cells. So I sent in by email and copied the assessor, so you should have from me an email.
There's another page.
Yeah, we do have it.
I take it as.
Yeah, so what that reflects is a revised calculation using the corrected square footage, and you can see the gross potential income, the 25% vacancy, the $8 shortfall, the 7% non-recoverable, leading to $86,619. Capitalizing at 8% turns into a value of $1,082,000. So that's the value I'm seeking. And again, as I said to you earlier, the $1,617,000 is really the starting point in the sense that it's the now corrected assessment. It's what the assessment should have been to begin with. And I'm asking essentially for a higher vacancy, a higher non-recoverable, and a slightly higher capitalization rate. And those are the differences between the assessor and I at this point. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Jonathan, any questions?
I have no questions, Mr. Chair, thank you.
Gail?
No, I have no questions. Thank you.
Harvey?
I don't have any questions either. Thank you.
I have no questions. So, we've heard all of the items scheduled today, and this hearing is now adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you for your time, everyone. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you,
Have a good
Jonathan.
day.
Yeah.
See you later.